Welcome to the History Time. My name is Renee, and today I will be presenting you with 10 facts about George Washington. George Washington, as you may know, is our first president. You also probably know him for being somebody who cut down a cherry tree and for being on money. One of those is true. He is on money, and correctly, he is on the $1 bill because he's the first president. That makes sense. However, he didn't cut down a cherry tree. That's just folklore stating he couldn't lie, which he told many of lies, just as we all do. Now, by ours, I'm meaning our President of the United States, more specifically, the United States of America. Now, George Washington actually married a widow at the name of Martha Danridge, though at the time her name was Martha Curtis. Her husband, before George Washington, actually died 2 years prior to the marriage of George and Martha Washington. She had children with Mr. Curtis. His stepsons he treated very much like his own children. Because of this, he actually had a grandson from one of his stepsons named George Washington Curtis. This man actually grew up to be a politician and be in Congress. With this, George Washington also was president from 1789 to 1797. He actually wrote up a letter of his resignation to step down after his first term. However, with considerable conversation from his cabinet and from other members of Congress, he decided to stay on for an additional term. He stepped down after that second term, stating that he could no longer continue and that he wouldn't want to bring tyranny, being that we, according to him, just left a nation of tyranny and he didn't want to bring back a king. Now, George Washington stepped down after his 2 terms, which is why it is traditionally considered the president should step down after 2 terms. Now, the only president to ever break this was Franklin Delano Roosevelt. He ran 4 times, won all 4 times, he died in his fourth, and Truman became president. Just a little background knowledge. Now you can only have 2 terms. But before that, you could have more than 2. However, because George Washington only ran for 2, that was the tradition set at time. So either you could have 1 or 2 terms as the president. After that, it was just considered shunned. Now, George Washington also had no party. As some of you may be aware, his vice president, John Adams, actually was a Federalist. His Secretary of State, which would become the third president, was a Democratic Republican. He was just called Republican at the time, but however, since the stark difference between today's Republicans and those Republicans, you will often see them listed as Democratic Republicans. Even though Republicans and Democrats from Democrats that came with Andrew Jackson and Republicans that came from Abraham Lincoln have actually way deformed over time, being that the modern day Democrat is considered what would be the original Republican and vice versa. Both parties are fine, however, that is where they currently stand at. So, now, another fact about George Washington in our 10 facts is actually most famous names that you know of probably come from the cabinet that he set up. Now, at the time, they weren't called cabinet. Cabinet actually refers to a term later down the line that the presidents would use because of their secretaries meeting in the kitchen, also known as a secret cabinet. That's why they are called that. At the time, they were the advisors of the president, the secretaries of the president, to be precise. Famous names include his Secretary of State, which I previously mentioned, Thomas Jefferson. His Secretary of War, at the time was called War, not Defense, Henry Knox, which you probably know his name from Fort Knox, one of the most famous forts in the United States, not including Fort McHenry, where the national anthem was written, the Star-Spangled Banner. As well as the treasurer, who you will find on a $10 bill, Alexander Hamilton. He was the first treasurer of the United States. Even though currency was not what it's set up as today, there was no national bank, no Federal Reserve, etc. However, between the several states, it was his job to regulate the currency through the Treasury, which the Secretary of the Treasury still exists today. If you ever get a check from Uncle Sam or anything like that, it will state the Department of the Treasury, not the Federal Reserve. Another fact about George Washington is that even though it is commonly thought that he ran unopposed, he didn't. He actually didn't even choose to run himself. He was considered a write-in. People wanted the congressional army, not Congress, congressional army leader to be the leader of the nation because so many people revered him so. He was actually the one who received the most votes for president. However, since it was written on one individual ticket, the one with the second most votes would become vice president. That's how John Adams became vice president. Not that George Washington wouldn't necessarily pick him as a running mate. However, he was very close also to a rival of John Adams, Thomas Jefferson, who in later time you will see that John Adams disliked Thomas Jefferson very much until their older age. And fun fact about those two, they died on the exact same day, the 4th of July. The last words for John Adams is that at least Thomas Jefferson still lives. At that time, though, he was already dead. Just fun fact. Now, for any Virginia who may be watching this, you may know this, but George Washington was born in Virginia. At the time, the colony of Virginia, now it is the Commonwealth of Virginia. Now, Commonwealth does not mean that it is not a state. It just indicates of what type of union the state was. Now, the Commonwealth of Virginia did receive an act of statehood when they ratified the Constitution of the United States and rejoined the Union after the Civil War. They did not decrease their number in statehood. West Virginia did secede from Virginia, but Virginia itself is still the same common state that it was then. George Washington is also one of the only presidents to not be sworn in Washington, D.C. He was actually sworn in the city of New York City. However, when Cass was voted for president, because New York had not yet ratified the Constitution, they did not actually vote for George Washington. However, he was sworn in there. What he used for his swearing in was what is considered in the Constitution the presidential oath of office, plus he added in, "So help me God." It is not in the Constitution, however, it has been carried on for every president ever since. From George Washington all the way to the current 45th president, Donald J. Trump. Regardless of how you feel about our current president, he was sworn in the District of Columbia and did include, "So help me God," as every president has before him. Now, the last couple facts about George Washington, I'd say, is that George Washington actually was buried at Mount Vernon. That's actually where he served all of his time, because the White House was not built until the end of John Adams' presidency. He actually served in his own personal home of Mount Vernon as president. Everything was conducted in Mount Vernon, where he currently lies today. You can find Martha Washington and George Washington's tomb there, just as you can find every other president in a tomb because of their ceremonial title as President of the United States. I hope you enjoyed the video today, and I thank you so much for your time. If you do like it, please hit subscribe below. If not, then you can comment and say what can be improved.